So hi everyone, thank you for tuning in today. I've got a really exciting guest. So I'm going to be speaking to Jane Travis. She is the founder of the Grow Your Private Practice membership, the Grow Your Private Practice business. So she is a counsellor of 14 years previously, and now she works solely with helping counsellors to go into private practice, how we can find a niche, how we can build our confidence, how we can market ourselves effectively. And I found Jane through, I think it was on Instagram, and she's got an amazing podcast as well called Grow Your Private Practice. So I really wanted her to come on my YouTube because I know there are lots of people in the counselling world, counselling students that access my videos, and I thought she could have some really helpful tips for people that are either finishing training and thinking about going into private practice, or people that are currently in employment and want to take that leap into private practice and how we can make it successful business. So I hope you enjoy this episode, and we'll go over to Jane now. Thank you so much for coming on my YouTube and chatting with us. I found you through Instagram, through your Grow Your Private Practice offering, your business, which has just spoke to me so much as someone that's coming through finishing my counselling training. And I thought it'd be really interesting to have a chat with you. So thanks very much for coming on today.
No, thanks very much for inviting me. It's really, I love talking to new people. I love talking to people in lots of different places. So thank you very much for getting me, inviting me along. It's an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, and obviously I know we were talking before we came on air that YouTube is not your usual place, but you do your amazing podcast, which is one of the things that I got really hooked into when I was listening to what you do and finding out more about the Grow Your Private Practice kind of membership offer that you've got, the podcast that you've got, all the guides and information you give on Instagram. And I just found the whole offering was just really well thought out and considered, and felt like it was talking to me as somebody that is interested in hopefully soon going into private practice. And I know there's lots of other people out there that may be doing counselling training at the moment and thinking, you know, what am I going to do at the end of this training and where am I going to take it? Because again, we were talking before that it's not that simple route that it was in times gone by, where, you know, you just see a job ad, you've got the relevant qualifications and you can just slip into that position. It feels like the world of work and counselling is much more kind of, you have to be a bit of a self-starter and navigate through a maze of where you're gonna take it and make a living out of it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's, I'm an ex-counsellor. I was a counsellor for 14 years. And you're absolutely right. It's not one of those jobs where you think, right, I'll just go and get some training and then I'll just check what jobs are out there and just go and get the job. Because as we all know, there are very few like paid counselling positions out there. And we could all have opinions on that. Well, I mean, I think most of us would agree that the NHS could do with a few more counsellors, and there needs to be more mental health services. There needs to be more counsellors out there. I think, you know, I don't think I know of a counsellor who wouldn't agree with that. But the way things are at the moment, that just isn't the case. So I think if you choose to be a counsellor, and people choose to be a counsellor usually because they don't usually think, I want to be a counsellor because I want to make money out of it. That's usually a secondary thing. But there's a drive to be a counsellor because of I think it comes from a passion, and it might be that they've had their own counselling and found it so helpful that they want to then go ahead and help others, or they know somebody else that's had counselling and it's helped them, or sometimes they're just very interested in the way the mind works, or they just want to, you know, get out there and help people. So there are several reasons why people get into counselling, but the long and the short of it is we go through the counselling, we love the training usually, and most people I speak to absolutely love the counselling training, and I did. I thought it was fantastic. And you get to a point where you finish your counselling training and then there's this enormous question mark of, well, now what do I do now? Because when we start the training, I don't think we go at it from a point of view of, right, I'm going to check first to see what jobs are there around before I do the training. You sort of do the training because you're sort of drawn to do it. But the long and the short of it is there aren't really a lot of paid jobs. So you get to the point of coming to the end of your training, and then there's a little bit of a panic of, well, what am I going to do? And that's what sort of got me into doing this. So I was a counsellor for 14 years, and I was in exactly the same same situation when I qualified. But I think for me, because I'd had some self-employment experience before that, I knew that I was quite happy to take on private counsellors, private clients, and the thought of having my own business kind of thrilled me. Thought, I had all the same fears that everybody does, but I saw it as being like a really good challenge. I liked the thought of running my own business, being my own boss, working in the ways that felt right for me, working with people that I wanted to. So for me, it wasn't a difficult choice to go self-employed because I could see all of the positives that come from it. That said, that was me. And like I say, I loved that. I saw it as a really positive challenge. But I know some people go into private practice, not from the point of, I really love this positive challenge, but from the point of, if I don't do this, then what else am I going to do? Am I going to have to say goodbye to being a counsellor? And that's a horrible feeling, I think. I think that's, if anybody's feeling like that, I would say there are a few things that you could maybe do to turn that around a bit, to turn it around and turn it into more of a positive challenge rather than a negative situation, because there are so many positives that come from working for ourselves. So yeah, so when we leave training, where do you start? What do you do? I mean, it seems that there's a to-do list that's not even a mile long, it's several miles long. Where do you even start? And it's completely overwhelming. So I started the Grow Your Private Practice. Well, I started working with counsellors basically to try and just help people with that. And eventually it's led me to where I am now. So that's really why I got into it, because I know how difficult it is to get started.
Yeah, and when you were saying then about the amount of things there are to think about, so there's all the practical side of it, of making sure you've got all your administration and your insurance and all that in place. But I guess where it seems like your skills are really focused is in that kind of marketing and where to invest your time to actually find clients, to set yourself up and do that in a way where you're using your time wisely. Because I think it can feel, especially with the amount of social media channels that there are and the amount of directories that there are, which I know you've got opinions on the directories. Yeah. It's really sort of finding how you're going to position yourself and then how you're going to spread the word about what you do, but in the most efficient way without spending lots and lots of time on things that aren't really going to find you the clients, so you can focus your time on actually doing that helping and working the one-to-one with the clients, which is what I think a lot of us who've done counselling training or work in this field want to do. We want to be sat either online or face-to-face with that client, connecting.
Absolutely. I mean, I love marketing. I mean, I find it brilliant. I think it's really creative, and I see it as a positive challenge. But that doesn't mean that I want to be doing it all hours of the day. I want to do my marketing and then crack on with the next thing, crack on with having a life, going out with friends or whatever. So what I try to do is I try to show people, because I think one of the things I often see is that people will get caught up in spending a lot of time in trying this thing and trying that thing. And like you say, with social media, there are, I suppose these days, 3 main social media platforms. And I think there can often be a tendency to think, right, I've got to be on them all. But by being on all of the social media platforms, you don't get any extra benefit from it, really. You're better off being on one platform and really learning how to do it well, learn about all the little tricks, learn about how that particular platform works, and focus all your energy into that one platform. And only when you get really, really good at that, then consider starting another. But really, if you're doing one platform well, you don't need to start another. So you can kind of save time by, being really targeted in what you do, by saying, right, I'm going to use social media, which is the best platform for me, and then how do you use it properly, so that you're not spending too much time on it. I think it's one of the things that I do feel really passionately about, because I think counsellors want to do the job that they've trained to do. They want to sit with somebody and work with that person and see those transformations and help them and all of that. That's the thing that they're passionate about. In private practice, in order to do that, you also have to do marketing, because people won't just find you. Not these days, there's too many other counsellors around. So you need to get out there, you need to get in front of people. And I think in order to do that in a really timely way, it's about getting systems in place and getting in, plans of what you're going to do in place, so that you're not kind of chasing your tail. Well, something I often do, and I don't know if you've ever done this, I get really excited about learning something new. So I'll start learning something new, and then there'll be that shiny object syndrome. Something will happen and I'll be like, oh, everybody's doing that thing, that must be the right thing to do. So it might be, if you're on Instagram or if you're on LinkedIn, you might sort of hear everybody talking about reels. So you think, oh, I must do reels. So you stop doing LinkedIn and you think, go and learn how to do reels. So you let LinkedIn fall by the wayside. Whereas if you just concentrate on the one thing that you want to do, you're going to get the results. Does that make sense? I don't know if but it's just, if you're getting focused on doing one thing, it is kind of the way to go. And I think as well, by starting doing one thing, it doesn't mean you have to do it forever. So it might be that you start doing one thing and you decide that actually I really, really hate this. Well, it's only once you've tried it that you know that, and then you can say, right, I'm not doing that anymore because I hate it, but I'm going to do this other thing instead. So it's about working out the right thing for you to do, because there are so many different ways you can grow your practice, and all these different things that we can do tend to work, but we don't have to do everything. So it's about finding the things that are right for you, that tick your boxes, and then just doing them consistently. And that's kind of the trick, and make it something that works for you.
Yeah, and what you said then about not spreading yourself too thin and focusing in, I guess that's if we come back to the very beginning of someone like me who might be thinking, I want to go into private practice and I want to get together a bit of a plan and work out where I'm going to take it. I know you talk, and I think we'll link some of your great podcasts below as well. And I know one of your recent ones, which I've not had a chance to listen to yet, is about finding a niche. And I guess what channels you're on depends on what your niche is going to be. So it'd be very different. Somebody who wants to work with younger people, they may specifically use something more like, I don't know, TikTok or Instagram. Whereas if you're thinking, I want to work with, say, elderly people that are experiencing a different set of issues and will be hanging around in a different place, you've got to really think about that niche. Because I know one of the things that I notice, and it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on this, is sometimes when you go on counselling directory, is that there are some people on there who have a list of the things that they can help people with, and it's like this long, it's everything. And I guess in a way, a bit like when you go to a restaurant, sometimes you can go to a restaurant that's got 100 things on the menu, or a really, really good restaurant tends to have a small, maybe 4 starters, 4 mains, 4 desserts. So I kind of think of private practice counselling similar to that how do you think it's best to go about it? Because you can try and catch everyone with those long lists of, I can help you with eating disorders, with anxiety, with depression, and all those things, or finding this area that you feel really aligned with, and just going after that smaller group of people.
It's like being a counselling Wetherspoons, isn't it? It's like when you go to Wetherspoons, they've got everything. They've got Chinese, they've got breakfast, they've got Indian food, they've got literally fish and chips, everything on there. So it's like, we don't want to be a counselling Wetherspoons, because we know that in Wetherspoons, it's not top quality, is it? You don't go to Wetherspoons to propose to your girlfriend, for example, do you?
No.
You can go there for a curry, and it's going to be okay, but it's not the same as going to the curry house down the road and having a really good Indian restaurant meal that's been made by, authentic people who've known, learn how, they're where that's their art. So for me, when I think of niching, it's about no longer being the Weatherspoons of counselling, but being the people, being somebody who's got that extra knowledge, that extra gravitas, so that somebody, when they need specific help, then they would choose you to go to rather than Weatherspoons. Does that make sense? I'm talking weirdly about Weatherspoons.
No, I think that analogy is so amazing, because that's really just like when I was talking about restaurants, I was thinking, where am I going with this? But that just came out of nowhere. But I really do agree with you, because I always find that slightly off-putting when I've looked for a counsellor myself, or family members that have asked me to help them find someone. And I think that, yeah, having that niche, it feels like a brave thing to do as someone that's starting out. But I think from what you're saying, it's probably the best way. And I think that inside all of us, we know that we can offer those core conditions and we can give empathy to things we haven't been through. But I think everyone does have an area that they tend to feel most passionate about, most engaged with, and where they can do their best work.
Absolutely. And I think it's about following the passion. And I think I often talk to people who feel a little bit anxious about visibility, a little bit anxious about having to, very often worrying that, oh, I've got to go and sell myself. And I say, look, you please don't think you've got to go and sell yourself. All you have to do is let people know that you're there, and people will find you. So it's about just getting out there. I've said to you before, I call it helping instead of selling. If you can get out there and help people freely, then people will notice you. And when the time is right for them to get some help, you'll be top of mind. So it's not about going out there and selling yourself. I've forgotten where I was going with this. Sorry, my mind, I went down a different route there of where I was going to go with that. What was I going to say? Oh, that's right. I think that when we're talking about having a niche, it is really talking about, what do I feel passionately about? Because when we feel passionately about something, we can talk about it for hours. So even if you're really, really shy, if you're a real massive introvert, if you're somebody who's, you're not going to be the center of attention, if somebody starts talking about this particular subject, you'll be talking and it'll be hard to shut you up. That's what happens, isn't it? You get passionate about your subject. And I think that when you can find what it is that you feel really passionately about, then it changes everything. So it tends to be the thing where, mostly counsellors have bookshelves full of books, often that they haven't read, but loads and loads of books. Is there a theme? Is there a theme running through all of those books that, the sort of thing like, if you go on holiday, you might read a counselling book by the pool instead of like the latest bestseller. Well, it's because you feel so passionate about what it is that book's talking about. So by finding your niche, it's opening up that passion. And I know that it's really hard for people to do. I really, really know that, because I've worked with people a lot about niche. So I've got a course in the membership, and I talk about, how you can find your niche. And I came upon this idea of, I call it a seedling niche, because like grow your private practice, it's all about growing. And I've got like my niches of like a little seedling called Sprout. So I call it a seedling niche. And basically I say, if you don't know what your niche is, if you haven't got something that's already there, that you already know that this is where you want to work, choose one of these 4, like I say, seedling niches to choose, just so that you can get, start attracting people to you, because having a niche is going to help with marketing. So you're going to start attracting people to you. And then over time, you'll decide, is that right for you? Do you want to narrow it down? Do you want to open it out? But just get started with something broad. So the things that are broad that I recommend you choose from is either you can choose from something like anxiety. So anxiety is obviously a massive subject. It can be, it can cover so many different things. Relationships. So this can be relationships with parents, family, romantic relationships, kids, all sorts of different types of relationships. The other one would be self-esteem. So self-esteem would be like confidence, boundaries, communication, anything to do with how you feel about yourself. And the last one would be grief and loss. So yes, of course, bereavement, but then also loss, maybe loss of a job, loss of health, loss of a pet, any sort of loss. And I came across these ideas when I was really thinking about niching, because I thought, people, how can I really help people? And I thought, right, I thought about the people that come for counselling, and I thought, what do they bring? What are the things that people bring to counselling? And I thought, well, most of them fit within those 4 different categories, really. So all of the different types of counselling that there are can fit into one of those different categories. So I thought, right, well, if you start with one of those, it's a very broad niche, and then it means that you can use that niche to attract people to you, and then see how that feels for you, and then, work on that marketing, get people, to come to you. And that's just going to help. It's going to help with everything, really.
Yeah, I find that really interesting that, it's sort of like that thing that we hear a lot online, follow your passion and all of these messages. And I think if you are one of those people that are lucky and have that, you've just found that naturally, like you say, you've picked up on patterns and you've noticed what kind of books you read and you think, this is the direction that feels right, then that's great. But then, like you say, it's also sometimes you don't know, and you need that little bit of a pointer and a starting place. And then, like you say, having those different options to start from, then you may then kind of niche further. Once you start with one of those, you might think, oh, actually, I'm working a lot with women of a certain age, or men in a certain area, and maybe I want to tailor it more towards that specific audience.
But equally, you can keep it just with one of these seedling niches. So think about how many people work specifically with anxiety. I mean, there are lots of people that work, and that's their niche, and they do very well. I mean, I can think of Anxiety Josh, I can think of Zoe Clements, and I've just had Elsie Owen on, the people pleasing therapist, as a guest on my podcast. And so she's under people pleasing. Well, that would, in my opinion, that would come under like self-esteem. So she's got a whole business that's based on self-esteem. So it's not that you necessarily have to, having a niche doesn't mean necessarily, although it can do, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a really tight niche. Having a very wide niche is absolutely fine. It's just about, how are people going to know that you're the right choice for them? So it's about, what does that potential client need, so that they know that you're going to be a good choice for them. So it's all about the client's needs. And if we keep the client and what they need and what they're looking for in our head, then that just helps everything.
And what you're saying there is, it feels as though we can become a kind of, not in a horrible way, but we can be focused on ourselves, because we can be thinking, what can I offer, and how should I do this, and how should I put myself forward? And I think, like you said, even just having that mind shift of, you're going to talk a little bit about yourself and your background, but it's mainly focused on, how are you going to talk to that person, and maybe having in mind a vision or a bit of an avatar of like, who am I trying to reach, and having that in mind can be helpful as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know a lot of people do the avatar. So if you don't know if somebody's listening to this doesn't know what an avatar is, it's when you kind of make an imaginary, like, perfect client. So you'd think about what they look like, how old they are, where do they live, what do they eat for breakfast, what car do they drive. I kind of go down a slightly different way of doing it, because I've never certainly try that. I know that works for a lot of people, but for me, I've never been very good at thinking, well, I always think to myself, well, does it matter what newspaper they read? Not that anybody reads newspapers now. So I would say, who are the clients that you've enjoyed working with most? Sort of put them in mind. Or if you haven't had any clients yet, if you really knew, you could think about something like, which of your friends would you like to see in your account? If you have a friend that could actually do with some help, and all of our friends could do with some help, couldn't they? What would you say to them? What are the sorts of things that would help them? So you could do it that way, or you could even take a character off a soap or something like that, and you could sort of think about them and then make all your marketing something that would be attractive for those people. But yeah, having somebody in mind in whatever way you get to that, I think can be really, really helpful.
Yeah, and talking to them as though sometimes marketing and social media can feel quite impersonal. And even when I've shared videos on YouTube or I share things on Instagram, I think people think I feel comfortable, but sometimes I think, why am I doing this? I'm just talking into my computer, and are people thinking I look silly or like? But what helps me sometimes is feeling like I'm having a conversation with someone, or the people that I feel most, like you said, that I want to connect with, sort of imagining that we're in a room together, and when I'm talking about something that, I'm not doing it in a way to be, super professional or false. It's as though it's a genuine interaction with those people, and they might not actually be there, but I'm hoping that, they will find it. They will be the people that will eventually see it. So the people that I respond to the most tend to be people that I feel I'm just having a conversation with, and really understand the little quirks and feelings that you have and situations that you find difficult, and just being real, I think is important, and not trying to be too professional and looking at qualifications and like you say, having this persona of someone that's got a big massive bookcase behind them, because that can sometimes feel quite false and intimidating for people.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, I can remember when I was training, there was a bit of a debate in the class about, should you have your qualifications out? Should you have a bookcase there? If you have a bookcase there, are there any books that you should remove? And all of these little nuances when you're a therapist matter in the counselling room, don't they? I think it matters outside of the counselling room that we try to be really as down to earth as possible. And really, I think one of the things that I did when I first became a counsellor is I thought I had to be like a professional counsellor, like with a capital P and a capital C. And I felt as though that meant I had to behave or put on a certain persona. And I had to use all my best English and try to use longer words. But there was a study, actually, I can't remember the name of it. It'll be on Google somewhere, but there was a study done that said basically, what was that? Did you hear that?
So sorry. These are the joys from working from home. This is my cat. This is my cat in the background.
Oh, that's so funny. Well, I'm surprised my dog's not barked yet.
I think she sometimes, when I'm doing this, she can hear me because I'm in a loft space upstairs, and I think she wants to join in. She wants to put her 2 pennies worth in. It was actually an article this month in Therapy Today about pets in the counselling room, so we should have pets in the YouTube video. Hopefully she'll be quiet now.
No, I'm all for it. What was I saying? I was saying, there's been a report done saying that if you use smaller everyday words, you come across as being more intelligent. So it's like the opposite to what I would have said. So when I started out, I was trying to use big words, trying to show off a little bit, I suppose. But the opposite is true. So if you use smaller, more everyday words, it means that people don't have to work so hard to understand you. So therefore, then you appear, I don't know, but then you appear more knowledgeable to them. So, if you're worried about having to be an expert or something like that, then try to relax into it. Just be a normal human being. I've got this saying, human first, counsellor second. Always remember you are a human first. And, if you can be a bit relatable and just allow yourself just to be you, then you'll enjoy it more, and it'll be more attractive for other people as well. I mean, I think that's the truth of it. Allow yourself just to be you.
And like you say, then being a human, and because it is quite a unique sort of relationship that you build with clients. And when you were talking then about being human and being real, and that feeling that, I think it comes across then that you're comfortable in yourself as well, which people always like, being around people that are comfortable with who they are and they're not out there to impress. Because obviously, if we're going to be working with clients, we want them to feel like they don't need to impress us or meet expectations. So I think that all ties in with what you said. And one of the things that really interests me, which I think is a fine line, which would be interesting to get your views on, is I think there was an article about it recently that I read, is counsellors and therapists that are in the public space that are very popular, and about that blurring the lines between your personal experience and your life and your world and the work that you do as a therapist. Because I think that's interesting how much of yourself and your personal, it's about self-disclosure, isn't it? When is it appropriate? And I guess that's something that it's getting more of a blurred line, I think, with social media. And there's a therapist called Catherine Astor that I follow, and she does it well, where she works mainly with women, and she will share certain elements of her life, not very, very personal, but just little snippets. And I do think that makes her feel like she's letting you in, her, you begin to trust her. And I guess it's about how much of yourself do you give. I don't know what your thoughts are around that.
Yeah, I think personal disclosure is something that can be really scary. And when I was a counsellor, I didn't really disclose anything, I was still in that sort of being terrified after being done. Sorry, I'm just getting comfy. I was still in that getting terrified after being trained about you must never disclose anything. And I think when it comes to counselling, in the counselling room, or not even in the counselling room anymore, but when you're with a client, I think you do, of course, have to be really clear about why you're going to disclose something. It has to be, purely for the benefit of the client. And that's absolutely fine. And I think, but when you're coming outside of the counselling room, when it comes to marketing, I think if you're going to be really, really shut down, then I think that makes it difficult for people to connect. I think there's a point that everybody has to find of where they feel okay with their personal disclosure. And I think it's different for everybody. It's different for people in different modalities, for example. There can be benefits for sharing a little bit about yourself, and it's also absolutely fine not to share anything about yourself. But we have to be clear about what we're okay sharing. And I think it's about doing some work on your boundaries beforehand. So if beforehand you think about this and think, right, where are my boundaries here? What am I okay sharing and what am I okay, what do I want to keep to myself? And I think that the lines are very similar to why you might disclose in the counselling room, because I don't think there's a need for any counsellor to willy-nilly share things like photographs of their holiday, or, I don't think we need to disclose, everything we do, or, I don't think we need to do that. But I do think that I think there's two ways, actually. There's one where there are some counsellors where if in their past they've struggled with the thing that is their niche. So, for example, if they've, like Zoe Clements, for example, she works with people to do with anxiety, and she struggled with anxiety in her past. So she talks about the fact that she's got experience of it. She's actually written a book, I've got it down there, called But I Should Be Fine. And she talks about her own experiences in there. But she talks about, her experiences of anxiety. And I think that helps people to recognize that this person will really understand when I go and talk about something that I feel a bit embarrassed about. So she shares that. She also shares like her dog and things like that. But it's quite boundaried in the way that she talks about these things. And then you've got so sometimes if you've got a niche where you've struggled with that particular thing yourself in the past, there are times when it can be beneficial to share it, but only if you want to. You never have to share anything. The other side of it is you don't have to share anything personal in, like, whether you're single or married or anything like that. But you could put a post out on social media of a picture of you in the coffee shop, of your cup of coffee and a slice of cake, and say, oh, I'm in the coffee shop having some chocolate cake or something like that. that's not going to cross any personal disclosure boundaries, but it's letting people see that you're a normal human being, you're doing normal human being things, you like chocolate cake, you know, you can then ask, you know, do you prefer chocolate cake or carrot cake or something like that? So that then becomes a post that's kind of about you as a person, but it's not really about you as a person. I think the link, I don't think a potential client would look at that and say, oh, she likes chocolate cake, you know, I can't think that that could possibly trigger anything anything negative. So I think personal disclosure is something to think about in advance. Think about where you might want your personal disclosure boundaries to be, and if you're not sure, just keep them really, you know, tight, certainly to start with, and just see how it feels. And if you don't want to share anything about yourself, you really don't have to. Don't force yourself to, because you see some people doing that. So if you see someone that's sharing a lot about their personal life, well, good for them. That's obviously okay for them. They've obviously thought it through. They're obviously comfortable doing that. But if you don't feel comfortable, don't feel that you have to, basically.
And what you're saying there, along with what you said about finding your niche, it feels like there's some work to do before you go into private practice and before you start marketing yourself, around kind of getting curious about yourself and your boundaries and where you're willing to go. And it seems as though it would be helpful. Like, I've just got in my head someone like with a journal and just jotting down things that they notice. And maybe that's just because that's the way that I do things. It's quite, you know, it's not very structured. It might be like, oh, I've just noticed I'm reading a lot of books on this, or I've drawn to this topic, and getting curious about yourself and where you're willing to go, and being confident in that. Because like you say, you can look at different people and you can want to emulate them, and I think there's nothing wrong with being inspired by what other people are doing, because that's, you know, can be a really nice part of doing this. But it seems like there's, as well as the practical side of going into private practice, there's some work to do around figuring out, you know, who you are and where you want to take it.
Absolutely. I think, you know, I think there's two things there. Yeah, there's one that's to do with thinking about what you want, what are your hopes and dreams, what would your life be like if you had the perfect practice? How many clients would that be? Where, you know, what would, in your perfect world, in your magic wand world, what would that look like? You know, would you have your own office? Would you work online? Would you do walk and talk? You know, really think, if you had nothing that could stop you doing it, what would you like? Because that gives you a starting point of what you can work towards. But the other thing is, I think you're absolutely right there, Ruth. It's about, I think having a journal there and jotting things down is a great idea, because I've said this a lot, and if you've listened to my podcast, you'll know, I think that marketing in and of itself is relatively easy. You know, it's maybe a new set of skills to learn, but they're skills that you can just learn. You know, you can learn off me. You can come and join the membership, and you can learn how to do niching and websites and social media and blogging, all those things. The thing that might stop you is the mindset. So the thing that might stop you is the imposter syndrome, the fears, the fear of failure, the fear of success, procrastination, perfectionism, all of those things. And it's those things that are most likely to stop you from being successful, you know, in whatever way success might look for you. So for me, I mean, I say to people in my foundations course, so the first thing that people do when they join, it's about, you know, when you start in private practice, one of the big things about it is to look at it as a really interesting sort of personal development thing that you can do for yourself. Because when you're learning these new skills that are different, a lot of things will come up. So like, if you think, right, I'm going to go and use social media, you might find that there are fears of visibility there, and that can stop you in your tracks before you even post anything. Now, what we can do is we can go, oh God, I'm just rubbish at this. Why can't I do this? Or we can have an open mind and a curiosity and say, oh, right, that's interesting. I know that I need to do this. I know that I want to do this. And I know that I'm working hard to go towards doing this. But I seem to have some fears. I wonder what's going on, because then you can do like we do in counselling. Then you can say, well, I wonder why this is happening. Is this a real fear? Is that thing that I'm worried might happen a real fear? And then you can do things to help to protect yourself, I suppose. So I think one of the really interesting things about being in private practice is it's fantastic for personal development. You'll learn, if you allow yourself to, you will learn so much about yourself, things that you didn't even know were there, because it is, I think a lot of it is about self-esteem and is it okay for me to go out there and do this and have people pay me to do this? And that's the first hurdle. Is it okay for people to pay me to do this? And that's a money mindset thing. That's a self-esteem thing. And when we work on that, that doesn't just help you in business, it helps you in life. So then it's really interesting, and it means that you can grow as a person as well as growing your practice. And I love that. I think it's really exciting.
Yeah, I love the way that you describe that, because I've never thought about it in that way. But, just so many of those things are coming up for me now, because just to give a bit of context, like I'm finishing my training, I'm suddenly at that point where I feel like I can't hide away anymore. I've got to start thinking and planning. And so many of those things are coming up for me. Like even just doing this interview now, things aren't perfect. I'm juggling motherhood. I've got a cat howling downstairs. And, some of those things might make me think, oh, I can't put this out, or I can't do this, and you just, it's like getting over that. Perfectionism personally for me is a big hurdle. And also as well, that self-esteem and that feeling, that giving yourself that permission slip that, you can do something, and you've done the training, you've got the qualifications, you want to work with people safely and ethically. So it's sort of giving yourself, it feels like giving yourself that permission to not be perfect, but to almost start before you're ready. I think the very first video that I did on YouTube, actually, I'll put a link to it below, was called Start Before You're Ready, because I didn't feel ready, but it was something that I wanted to challenge myself to try. And I remember feeling on the day I recorded it, thinking, what am I doing? This is so embarrassing. I can't believe I'm doing this. But I just did it anyway. And it wasn't perfect, and it was a little bit messy. But I think that is something that can hold you back in private practices, that feeling of, I've got to do social media, I've got to get a perfect website, I've got to have the perfect counselling room in the perfect location. And all of those things can stop you. Whereas it almost feels like, for me personally, just like taking it a step at a time and just allowing yourself to sort of roll with it. And know that you're going to feel vulnerable, and know that there's always going to be somebody that looks more professional or is doing things in a different way, but just to allow yourself to be vulnerable and evolve in a more public space, and to know that you probably will look back in some years' time and maybe cringe a little bit at what you said on social media, or what your website looked like, but just to think, I'm going to do it. Like, done is better than perfect. I love that. It always sticks in my mind. Just do it, and it won't be perfect, but you can evolve, and just to be comfortable with that vulnerability.
Yeah, I mean, I just everything that I've done has been like bootstrapped. I've done like when I first started, I made my own website, I did my own branding, like everything I just did. And it was just a case of, right, I can't afford to have somebody come in and do all these things. I have to learn how to do it myself. I think that it's really important to recognize that if you don't look back on your first website and think, oh my God, then you waited too long.
I like that. Yeah.
You waited too long. You're supposed to look back on your first website and think, but the first website is kind of, it's your way of getting started. And I sometimes see people and they're saying, right, I'm going to start in 6 months' time, or I'm going to start in a year. And I think, well, why don't you start now? Because if you start now, you're going to be getting the experience. Whereas if you start in a year's time, you won't have any experience. You'll only have had information that you've read from books. And for me, one of my big things at the moment is it's all about action. Action is the antidote to fear. Action is the thing that takes you forward. It's better to just take action. I mean, when you really think about it, to get started in private practice, what you need is either a computer or a room that's got 2 chairs in it, possibly a table, a few tissues. You always need a few tissues. You need to be qualified. In this country, you need to have supervision and you need to be insured. That's what you need. Ultimately, that's all you need. Everything else is a bonus. So if you've got that, you've got enough to get started. So you just get started and you pick things up as you go along and you learn by your mistakes. You can't go out there and learn if you're not making mistakes. So, you know, the podcast that comes out for me next week is my 100th. I've done 100. It's hard to believe.
Congratulations. Yeah, amazing milestone.
Looking back now, it's like really, really cringeworthy what they were like before. And if I look back after another 100, it'll be cringeworthy what I'm doing now. But it's the only way you learn, isn't it? So it's far better to just learn on the job, you know, just crack on, get out there and you'll learn, you will.
Yeah, and one of the things that I like about what you're doing as well with your membership and is it called the club? Is that what you refer to it as? Or
I used to. In my book, I've called it the club, but I like to call it the membership now.
The membership, yeah.
It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, so in the membership, one of the things that I think is so powerful about that is that having other people and your peers, because obviously, yes, it's helpful to learn from, you know, experts and really experienced people like yourself, and people will get so much value from that. But I can imagine that the members will get a lot of value from learning from each other and talking about vulnerabilities and being really authentic about what they're doing, because that seems so valuable amongst counsellors, and something that there is that community there that people want to connect with each other.
Yeah. And I think we kind of have a different language, don't we? Because we're all, you know, doing the same thing. We have a different language and we understand all the little intricacies. I mean, I've got a story. When I was a counsellor still, the way my house is, I live in a bungalow. So say the bungalow's there and my garage is there and the entrance hallway bit is now, it's not outside now, it's inside with a door on each end. So I would see people, I did my garage, so I had my garage converted. And sometimes my dad would just let himself in, not come into the counselling room, but let himself in. So of course, my little ears would be like, well, who's that? What's going on? So it took my attention off the client. And so I'd say to my dad, Dad, can you please just not let yourself in? And he's like, okay, no, I won't. So he'd let himself in, but he'd be quiet. But you know what being quiet's like, especially if you've got an anorak on. So he'd be trying to be really quiet, which was twice as loud as if he'd just walked. And then I was not only, my ears were swiveling round, I was then really cross because it's like, I told you not to do that. So when you tell someone, like if I moaned to a friend about it, my friend would sort of be, well, what's the big problem? But if I say that to you as a counsellor, you understand that that's taking you away from your client. Does it make the client feel unsafe? Because do they worry that that person's going to come into the room? You know, it's a lot more complex. So knowing that there are people there that speak the same language as you, and there's so many things we do as counsellors, other people would think, well, what does that matter? That's just a little thing, you know, like a little thing about, you know, whether you should have water in the room or not. You know, there's a debate about that, isn't there?
Yeah.
Everything we do as counsellors, all those little things matter. So it's great to have somebody there who understands and can see why it might matter so that you can make your own mind up. So yeah, having people speak the same language is really great.
Yeah, and speaking of like memberships and reaching out and finding people, I was actually talking to somebody today who's got a very successful private practice, and she's setting up near where I live. She's currently setting up a women's wellness space, which sounds incredible. She does hypnotherapy as well, and she was saying to me that actually don't underestimate the value of old-fashioned kind of getting to know people, just connecting with different people in your area and you'd be amazed. She said you'd be amazed at how important that still is, because if you can get that word of mouth and referrals that way, sort of not to overlook those sort of old-fashioned things of getting out there and meeting people. I don't know what your thoughts are on that outside of the digital space.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, before lockdown, I used to do a bit more work on like offline marketing, because I think, especially if you're working face to face, you want to be getting known in your local area. And one of the great things of doing that is going to networking events. You can go to networking events, but also just chatting to people, or going into the local hairdresser and seeing if they'll put a poster up for you, or all of those things. So just chatting to people. And I think it's a win-win situation, because people get to know you as a counsellor, so you start getting that know, like and trust thing. So people buy from or use the services of people who they know, like and trust. But also you're going to make friends as well. So when I used to do lots of networking, I made friends, and one of my friends now just lives up the road, and she's like my business bestie. We're really good friends. We've been to conferences together. We do some work together, and it's just lovely because, it's a friend. So I've got loads of people in my local area that I met through that, and they remember you forever. I mean, I haven't been seeing clients since, I think it was 2019 I stopped, I think. And I'll still get people phone up and say, are you still seeing clients? Because my friend needs some counselling and I wanted to recommend her. And I'm like, oh, that's very kind of you, but no. So it's the gift that keeps on giving, really. So just by getting known in the area, you're kind of meeting people to be friends with, but also it's starting a network of people that know you and, know, like and trust you. And anybody that they know that's struggling with anything, then they'll pass on your details. And it's yeah, you're right, it probably is seen as a little bit old-fashioned these days, but it's definitely a good thing to do, without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, and I think some of these things, like I know we're talking about, there's a certain level of planning and you want to be thinking about your boundaries and your niches and all these different things, but there is an element of it that is not something that necessarily needs to be planned. Whereas once you feel like you know what you're doing and you've got like a little short summary that you've got in your head of how you describe what you do, you can just go out into the world and think, I'm going to share this with people where it's appropriate. And like you say, it can feel quite organic, because without even really trying, I share online on my Instagram about certain things, and my niche that I feel I want to move into is working with women, specifically women around those cycles of, fertility, pregnancy, motherhood, all of the mental health issues that can come with those things, and having a safe space for women in that area. And just through talking about those things from a genuine place, people from the fitness world that work with mums have just got in touch with me asking me about counselling, and that's how I found this lady who's setting up the wellness space, and then another person that ran like a women's focused health and nutrition centre got in touch with me. So they're not necessarily leading to financial outcomes right now, or
no way of knowing where they're going to lead you. No way. Yeah. And whether it does or not is still fantastic.
Yeah, it's a nice feeling and I'm just sort of getting in my mind a little bit of, oh, maybe some referrals could come through from that, and maybe that's someone that I can keep on building relationships with. And I think that's the thing, is it's like you say, thinking about helping rather than selling, and also as well just thinking about connecting with people, counsellors, but people in the wider circles that that you can all just support each other and keep in touch with, and you don't know where things will lead. And that's one of the things that I think is the most exciting about it, is that you just don't know what avenues you might post something, someone will see it, it'll connect you with them, and it's exciting to think where it could go.
Yeah, Absolutely.
Yeah.
You don't know where any of it will go, and you can just meet someone or do one little thing, and it can just open new doors. And I always talk about having a private practice as being a marathon, not a sprint. And it takes time for all of these things to get known, to get seen, to make connections. But once you start, again, start now, don't start in a year's time, because once you start, then all of these things work cumulatively. So some people might see you on social media, some people might see you locally, you might make some connections with that women's wellness thing. And so cumulatively, more and more people get to see you. And that's when your marketing then doesn't become a drag. It's like interesting and it's kind of fun, because and you can be creative and you can be out there talking to these people and helping these people. And a side effect of that is you'll get more people, come to you for counselling. So yeah, it all works together cumulatively.
Yeah, it sounds a bit like how you've got on your website, you talked about the little sprout, and it feels almost like it's the hard work is planting that garden. You've got the blank slate, you're planning out what kind of plants you're going to put in where and what you want it to all look like. And then some things might not work out and they might die off, but then other things will really flourish. And then you've got like those perennials that once you put the work in, it becomes easier and they'll keep on coming back. So it feels as though it's that initial work. And then, like you say, hopefully as time goes on, it becomes something that looks after itself if you plan it right.
Yeah, there's always going to be a bit of work, but if you plan it right, you can make it that sort of garden that's like, what is it? Low maintenance. That's right. Let's all have a low maintenance business.
Yeah. And I'm also aware that, I'm talking about this, I don't think I'm a total extrovert. I get terribly nervous. I doubt myself. I've got this horrible inner critic in my head. But I am aware that I'm someone that's got to a point where I feel like, oh, what the hell? I'm just going to give that a try. I'm just going to do this YouTube interview and stick it out there. But I'm aware that some people find it like excruciatingly painful. Like they can be amazing sat in a room with somebody or on a one-to-one, but the thought of like putting themselves out there is so difficult. I don't know if there's anything that like little pointers or how you can creep out of your shell a little bit if that's how you're feeling.
Absolutely. I mean, there's two different things there, isn't there? One is know yourself. So if I'm a massive introvert, I'm virtually a hermit, that's why I've got a podcast, because I can't bear the thought of sitting here having people look at me. It's like, oh my God, people are going to look at me. What about my hair? What about my makeup? What about all my chins? All of that sort of thing. So, so for me, I've chosen to do podcasting. So like I say, you can make that garden however you want it to be. So I used to do a lot of networking, but as an introvert, I'm not a natural networker. That doesn't mean that as an introvert you can't network, because there are ways of doing everything. But if you know yourself, if you know that you're an introvert and therefore you need to maybe work out the best way for an introvert to do networking, that means that you're going to go in, you're going to have a better shot at it. If you know that you're an extrovert, then podcasting wouldn't be the right thing for you. You'd be better off doing something, or at least podcast with lots of guests. So it's about really learning who you are and what you enjoy doing, because if you enjoy the thing you do, you'll do it more and you'll do it regularly, and it's consistency that really matters. So yeah, learn about yourself, and then remember that there are so many different ways to market your practice, that there is always going to be a way that you can market your practice that you'll feel comfortable with. So don't force, I would suggest that, just don't force yourself to do a particular thing. Definitely try it, give it 3 months and give it your best shot for 3 months, and make a pact that if after 3 months of really going for it, you hate it, then give it up and go and do something else, because you won't be good at it. We're good at things we enjoy, aren't we? It's like with the niche, we have a bookcase full of things we really want to read. Well, we don't. We have a bookcase of things we think we should read and don't read a lot of them. But the things we enjoy reading, we'll read when we're up by the pool on holiday. So the more we can do the things we enjoy doing, then you're going to do it regularly and consistently and enjoy it, and it's going to be more successful for you because people will react with you because they're getting a best version of you. So yeah, get to know yourself, what works for you. There is no right or wrong way, there just isn't. So if you ever listen to someone and they say, right, you must do Facebook ads or you must do whatever, you know, you don't, you can make you make it work around what you want, and there's loads of ways of doing it.
Yeah, and I think that's so nice about your approach, and why, like, I found you and was drawn to ask you to do this, because, you know, you do everything in such a natural way, and it feels very much like it's about working out what's right for you. There are no rules. And I think that that's a really great way for people to look at it, is that nothing's set in stone. You know, it's about experimenting, being curious, trying things, and using those analogies. Like, we've used quite a lot of analogies during this, and relating it to other things in your life. Like, exercise was what made me think of that. Like, I could never go running. I hate running. It just saps the life out of me. My husband loves running. Like, whereas if I go to a dance class or something like that, I feel like I don't even notice that I'm exercising, because it's what I enjoy. So it's a little bit like that, isn't it? It's sort of finding the things that feel really natural to you, and not having to go on TikTok or do Instagram reels if that's not what you want to do. You know, there's so many different ways to be creative and market yourself, that you can find a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Trust yourself, listen to yourself, and do the things that are right for you. Yeah, absolutely.
And I know there's a lot of messaging out there, that it's hard to go into private practice. It's hard to find clients. It's so competitive. And there's so many counsellors out there. And those voices of doubt and doom and gloom, you know, obviously there's the realities that it can be difficult. But I think that the people that seem to succeed and do it well are the people that get really clear on how it's going to work for them, do things that feel like it's not a slog, it's enjoyable, and really run with that. And I'd imagine, on the whole, those tend to be the people that will attract clients and be able to make it sustainable.
Yeah.
We're saying that we're coming towards the end. I feel like we've covered so much, and one of the things that I thought I'd end with is, there's been so much change and movement in counselling over the last couple of years because of COVID and what platform we're on now, Zoom. No one had ever heard of that. It feels like the space is really changing, and I don't know what your thoughts are on where you feel like it's going to go to private practice, what the space will look like over the next 5 years or so.
Yeah, it's hard to say, but I just think that at the moment we're in a situation where there's the rising cost of living, and we're all very, very much aware of it. We've all come out of COVID, so we have been through a lot, we're going through a lot. We don't know what's going to happen. What I know, and what I'm absolutely sure of, is that more and more people will access counselling, will access help for their mental health. I think when I started, counselling was still a little bit shameful. It was still a little bit, you didn't talk about it. And things have changed. And now if you watch anything on the telly or you listen to anything on the radio, it's like, if you need any help, access a counsellor. We know that there aren't enough counsellors in the National Health Service, and which we, like I said before, we've all got opinions about, but people are still going to need help. And I know that there are a lot of people going through financial struggles at the moment, and obviously I really feel for them. But when it comes to private practice, there are still enough people out there that can afford to pay for private practice, and there always will be, because although a lot of people are going to be very hurt by the financial crisis, not everybody is going to be in that situation, and there are going to still be plenty of people that can afford to go for counselling. There's never been more people that need help than now. After the lockdown, all of the anxiety, all of the issues in relationships, all of the just everything, all of the stress, there's so much. And like I say, life at the moment feels, with the climate crisis, with the war in Ukraine, there's so many things that are really big, really serious, and people need help to unpack all of that. So that's all the big stuff. And then they've got their own personal life as well of what's happening for them. People need help, and people are recognizing how useful counselling is. So I think that people are going to carry on needing counselling. It's going to be more and more needed. I hope that people are going to be able to, the people who need it are going to be able to access the help they need through, the National Health Service, and be able to get help. But there'll always be a place for private practice counsellors. And it's getting more and more, it's talked about all the time nowadays. There's a lot more talk about men accessing counselling. There's a lot more talk about suicide. There's a lot more talk about all of these difficult issues that at one time were swept under the carpet. So all of the people that are learning that, oh crikey, maybe I need some help with that, need to go and get help from somewhere. So I think it's our jobs as private practitioners to let them know that we're there, to let them know that we help, because sometimes they think, oh, there's only the NHS there, and they don't know that there's private counselling. Now, as I say, I do understand not everybody's going to be able to afford it, but it doesn't mean that nobody can afford it. And I think that that's some of the money mindset thing that we have to work through, because just because the system's broken, it doesn't mean that we personally have to fix it. So I think sometimes we can say, all right, well, I'll work for free, or I'll have to do concessions because people haven't got enough money. And we have to, again, go through what are our boundaries around that, because working for free or working for half price or always giving concessions has an impact on your own personal self-care, has an impact on your own stress. It's not unusual for counsellors to suffer with burnout. It's a hard job that we do. We're sitting there and witnessing that person's pain, the cruelty that person's had in their life. And it's difficult, and we have to listen to that. We have to be there for them, hold space for that. And we can't just go out of the room and go, God, that was hard. I've had this and this happen. We hold on to it ourselves. It's very difficult. So we're not just sitting around listening to people. It's a very, very hard job. And I think that good counsellor self-care means getting paid well, because otherwise we put ourselves in a position of burnout and depression. We have to look after ourselves. So it's not about, oh crikey, well, as a counsellor, I've got to help people. We have to get really clear on the fact that you're providing a service that produces, very often for the client, a real transformation, a change in how their life is going to be. How do you put a price on that? That's difficult. So yeah, I think counselling is going to be needed more and more, and more people are going to access it, and it's going to become just something that people access now, rather than something they have to be very shameful about.
Yeah, that was just amazing what you were saying there about, again, like not always looking at the negatives, because there are difficulties, there are challenges, but like you say, it's having that knowledge of yourself, and going back to what you said before about that personal development part of private practice, and knowing your own worth and getting comfortable with what you offer, so that you are able to help people. Because it feels like, to tie everything up, like once you find what you're meant to do in this counselling world, and you get all of that in place, that you will attract the right people. It might take some experimentation and some tinkering around, but people will be drawn to you if you're talking to them in a natural way, in an area that you feel is important to you. That's going to resonate with people, regardless of money and difficulties. That some people will find the times to come really, really tough. But there is definitely, feels like there's a big space for people that really, really need that counselling environment to help them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time. And before we finish, do you want to tell people I'll put all of the links below, but where should people find you? Where do you live online for people to speak about?
I've got the Grow Your Private Practice show, which is my podcast, and you just search for that. I've got the book, the Grow Your Private Practice book, that you can find on Amazon. If you need some extra help, come and join the Grow Your Private Practice membership, where we look at like all of the different aspects of growing a private practice, practical and mindset. And come and say hi to me. I'm either on LinkedIn. So if you're on LinkedIn, it's Jane Travis, Jane without a Y, or on Instagram, Grow Your Private Practice. So I'd love it if you came and said hi and said that you saw me talking to Ruth. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, and I think just people going on and seeing what you do, you could help them, but just you as an example of someone that isn't, you know, everywhere. You've got your places that you are, you're doing those things really well. Your podcast is just a fountain of knowledge for people. And hopefully this conversation is just added to that. And as I say, all links will be below so people can find out more. And thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me.
Pleasure.
I found it so helpful, and I hope that it will speak to lots of other people as well.
My pleasure, Ruth. Thank you so much for inviting me along. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah. So Jane was just amazing. I hope you really enjoyed it. It was an hour long, I think, of just really informative, interesting content about really getting to know ourselves and building our confidence and our personal development as part of this private practice journey, and how, despite this turbulent environment that we're practicing in right now, that there are ways to make a really successful, flourishing private practice, and how we can find out more about ourselves and not see marketing as this chore, as it can feel something more natural if we can be niching in something that we feel really kind of empowered and confident and passionate about. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. All the links are below, and I will see you next time. I know the videos are sporadic at the moment, but hopefully I'm going to be doing some more interviews really soon. So I will catch you later. All right, thanks. Bye.